Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're well. Welcome to part two of this recruitment course. So, this is for anyone looking to start a recruitment agency. We're going to be talking about the process of the recruitment agency. Now, in the playlist, there is a description for if you want to tackle the whole course or go through it. Checklist. So, this is what we're going to be learning or covering in this snippet of the course. What does a recruiter do? How exactly does a recruitment agency make money? Who pays them, etc.? What's the usual process? What does a recruiter do from start to finish? Summarized. Temp and perm payments, because they do differ. Also, the payments do and how much you can potentially earn. And also the cycle of a job offer. So, we're going to cover it quite quickly. It's not going to be a long video. It's just a brief overview for anyone that wants to know what a recruitment agency does, how they get paid, etc. So, what exactly does a recruiter do? Now, there's a common misconception. Most people think, and most candidates I talk to think we're there only to help them find jobs. In fact, I thought this. I used to call out recruitment agencies and wonder why they're not helping me. So, lo and behold, we are a commercial business that we help clients find the desired candidate. We might not agree with their choices, but that is our position. We work for our clients. That is it. By proxy, we do help client candidates. Sometimes we help them more than we feel in terms of, coinciding with the actual client itself. However, by proxy, you need both parties to be involved. However, if you categorize it in a legal terms, we work for our clients or in partnership with our clients. So, what does a typical process look like? How does it all work? So, a simplistic form is we speak to a potential client, we agree rates, we sign the terms of business. So that's our contract. Then they give us a brief. Hello, we're looking for somebody, a nurse on 40,000 salary, and they work 40 hours a week. And this is what their job entails, and they must have this specific qualification or skill set. They give you a brief overview of what a desired candidate would look like. Now, there is obviously an interview process. With temp, there sometimes isn't, there usually isn't, sometimes there is. So everything always comes back to this. This process will always be involved, yeah, no matter how brief it is or how long it is or how long the process takes, that everything circles back to that. Now, simple version for a candidate, because equally we're going to be speaking to candidates. You want to see if they've got commitment. Does the salary match? There's no point talking to a nurse that is, on 80,000 a year. She's not going to go for your 40,000 salary job. So it's about matching them correctly. Is the location fine? You obviously give a brief about the company. So it's important to know your company. Look, this company has, pioneered this technology. They specialize in this. And it's equally as good if the candidate shows commitment on the brief and does research. And then you collect this candidate's CV and you put them forward for an interview. Now, a more complex version of it, or not so much complex, a different way of recruiting, which is becoming more popular, and I would recommend working towards this, is you headhunt a candidate. And by that, I mean you could do a very simplistic term is you can go onto LinkedIn, message a candidate, have a conversation on the phone, and they tell you, I'm looking for this salary in this location, and they need to be, in this field of work, for example. And you'd still collect their CV, and then you'll spec them in. So you'd go to a client and you'd say, look, I'm working with this candidate. You call up, I don't know if it's a doctor, you call up local GP surgeries or local clinics and say, look, I'm working with a general practitioner, 5 years experience. Would you be interested in interviewing them? And then again, they'll say, what are your rates? They'll sign your terms, they'll give you a brief, and then you'll start the interview process. That's pretty much how it works. Now, a rare scenario, and God bless these candidates and clients that do, they call you up. And that comes with time, marketing. It's usually referral based, but you always go back to the simple version of both of the candidates and clients. So that's the typical process as well. So, how does the process work? What does it look like? How does it work? Who speaks to who, etc. So, a client will sign your terms. So, if we go back and we've done this and we've signed our terms, yeah, a client will sign your terms and they'll give you a brief. And you'll find the candidate and the candidate will be happy. Now, what do you do in that situation? So you've got a nurse and you've got a client looking for a nurse. You would email the candidate CV once you've satisfied, this one we was looking at. Once all these criteria are met, you would email the CV and say, look, this nurse matches what you're looking for. I think they're a good fit. Would you like to interview? They'll go to, now you'd wait client feedback. Now the client will email you back or call you back and say, oh, I've got this question, or, do they have this skill set? Or can you find out if they've done any work in this field, etc. They might just say, CAD's fantastic. Can we arrange an interview? I'm free on Wednesday, 4 p.m. Can we do it by Zoom? Yeah. Or this is our office. Can you do that? And you'll arrange it. You'll call the candidate and say, fantastic. They really liked your CV. They would like to meet with you for an interview. And you'll get availability on the candidate side, client side. Sometimes gets complex. I find interviews can be troublesome, especially if the candidate is working. But there's always, always, always a way to arrange an interview. So going back to that, you'll arrange the interview. You'll email the candidate and client. You'll say, look, I've confirmed with the candidate to the client, and you'll email the candidate, say, I've confirmed with the client, and you put it in writing. The reason we put it in writing and make sure the address is correct, so a candidate can't say, oh, I didn't get the email, or you told me 2 o'clock and I didn't know it was 4 o'clock. So always put it in writing, and I always text as well the candidate and just say, look, I dropped you an email, but in case your internet isn't working, here's the address, and my CRM does that automatically. After the interview, I typically call the candidate, and before the interview even takes place, I speak to the candidate and I say, look, I'm going to call you after, or should I call you in the evening? And they usually say, no, call me after. So I leave it some time, an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, and I call and say, look, did you like the client? Because it's equally as important for the candidate to like the client. If they say yeah, and I usually start with, were they very welcoming? Because what I don't want to do is work with a client that isn't welcoming to candidates, number one. And that gives me a bad vibe. I don't want to send anyone in. It will make me look bad as well. And that's not what good businesses are built on. If the candidate says, I love them, the facilities are really nice, I'll ask some more questions, and afterwards I will ask, if they made you a job offer, would it be something you would consider? And they say, look, if they make me an offer, I'll consider it. Or they'll say, yeah, I'll review it when I see. Or they'll say, look, I didn't like the vibe. Cool. Regardless, you give both of the client's candidates. I then call the client up. The reason I call the candidate first is to make sure they showed up and what they think. And I asked the client, are you potentially looking to make an offer? Or, I spoke to the candidate called me, or I called them, and they're pretty much interested. They would like to, if they were to make an offer, they're likely to accept, just to let you know. Yeah. I sometimes do and don't say that. It's situational. Now, if an offer is made, the client will say to you, look, I would like to offer this candidate the position of nurse. Our offer is 40,000. Now, this is just an offer. This is not written in stone. However, if you call the candidate back and email them and they say, yeah, I'd like to accept, you arrange a start date. This is our job, to arrange a start date. Or the client will give a potential start date if there's a notice period, etc. And you must follow up feedback. If there's a notice period, there's a chance of a counter offer, or there's a chance of a candidate still looking for another job. So you need to be aware and make sure everything's going well. Even if it goes wrong, you want to make sure you was on top of it and the client sees you are on top of it. 9 times out of 10, it usually goes well, but sometimes there are misdemeanors and mishaps that do happen. You must also keep in touch with both the candidate and client. Don't call the candidate at work, because some clients do get funny with it. If you're calling candidates back, they think you're going to move them to another position, because some agencies do that once they're out of notice period. So I tend to typically just keep in touch, especially how did your first day go? Were they nice to you, etc. Yeah, everyone was lovely there. Thanks for calling, CADS. Okay, I'll call you in a few weeks. This is an integral part of the process. You never know, that nurse could work their way up and become manager or head of recruitment for their ward, and they come to you afterwards because you gave a great service. I can't tell you how much business I've won off the back of a simple phone call. It works wonders. So, how do you get paid? Enough of the rubbish. How do we get paid? So, it's very much term dependent. So, when you go back, it all stems back to the initial process. You agree to rates. Yeah. And it's term dependent. Let's say, for example, it's usually percentage based. So, if you are charging 10%, It's usually percentage based of the yearly salary. So the nurse was paid, for our example, was paid 40,000. Then we get to 4,000 plus VAT if you are VAT registered. That's how it typically works. Now, a typical situation is the candidate will have a notice period, like the example we gave, of 1 month. So that means if the placement happens, you have to wait pretty much 60 days before money hits your bank account, because it's the notice period and it's when the candidate starts. So within 30 days, the candidate will start. There is also on the permanent side a refund or rebate period. And what this means, this is like a safety element for the clients. So if a candidate starts and they pay £4,000, but the candidate leaves after 2 weeks, they can expect, depending on what your term says, is 80% rebate. If they leave within 4 weeks, it's 60%. 6 weeks, this is just an example, and then 8 weeks and so on. Yeah, till it gets to like the 8th or 12th week, and then it's like 20% back. 9 times out of 10, you can kind of say to the client, look, still pay the invoice, settle the invoice, and what I'll do is I'll replace them. And that's pretty much what the best way to go about it is. So that's permanent. That's direct hire permanent. And for temp, the difference is on the temp side, you are charging either daily, hourly, sometimes contractually, so a 3 month period. And a simple example is the worker is getting paid £10 per hour, and your charge rate is £5 per hour. So the client is paying £15 per hour to you directly, and you are paying the candidate £10 an hour. There are costs involved. I'll get into more details when I do a course or a video on temporary recruitment in more details. There are insurance costs, holiday pay, national insurance. There are costs involved. Every bit of your software, if you have staff. So you might actually net £1.86 per hour off that £15 charge. So it's very important to break even. That's just an example of what you can make. I can't give an exact because every company will have different overheads. There's insurance costs, etc., depending on what you have. Now, the payment is much quicker, and also the income is more passive residual as well. So once the worker's going out there, if they're there for 6 months, you haven't got to do anything and you're getting paid per hour. And you can have unlimited candidates working for you technically. So it really is, whereas on the permanent side, you've got to find them, arrange the interview, stuff like that. Now, a typical payment terms is the client will pay you 1 or 2 weeks, usually 2 weeks after the candidate starts or when they've started work. So if they've worked this week, you'll get paid next week or the week after. But the candidate has to be paid at the end of the week, not the week after. If they work Monday to Friday, Friday is their payment day. And some candidates will get paid every 2 weeks, stuff like that. So typically agencies use an umbrella company who will pay the client or the candidate first. The client will pay them, and then they'll take their fee and send you your profits afterwards. Now, there is no rebate or refund period. Simply, if the worker doesn't work, you don't get paid. So if you think about it, if you've got 100 warehouse workers working, you'll be getting £186 per hour working passively. That would be a lot to run. It's not that simple, but in theory that's what you'd be earning, and that's pretty decent money in the grand scheme of things, especially if you can do that alone. But God bless you if you can. So next video, there's a playlist in the description. Click that. If you do want to book a call with me, go onto cadsmoney.com and you can book a call. Hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. All the best.